Diseases may be a foreboding subject today, but as I'm sure you can imagine, in the early 20th century, before the development of antibiotics, better treatment, and higher standards of medical care, they were not only far more frightening, but far more lethal. Throughout the 20th century, sanatoriums were built in order to ease the suffering of the sick and dying. One of the largest and most skin-crawlingly creepy was the Waverly Hills Sanatorium of Louisville in Jefferson County, Kentucky. The sanitarium was opened in 1910 to treat minor cases of tuberculosis before they became more dangerous. Tuberculosis is a severe and potentially lethal bacterial disease of the lung, spread through coughing and sneezing, that can drastically impact breathing and, if left untreated, can cause death. It was originally built to help combat and treat the outbreak of tuberculosis known as the White Plague that was ravaging the local populace of Jefferson County. The outbreak itself is blamed on numerous wetlands that surround the area, near the Ohio River in particular, that were the perfect breeding ground for the tuberculosis bacteria, and a general lack of sanitation. At its inception, it was capable of housing 40 early case patients who were in the emergent stages of the disease. The first structure being a small, two-story wooden sanitarium with one main building/administrative area and two open-air pavilions, each housing 20 patients. In early 1911, the city of Louisville began preparations to build a new city hospital for general medicine, but it was decided it was better to not include facilities in this new building for the treatment of pulmonary tuberculosis, and $25,000 was set aside for the constructions of other buildings to help deal with more advanced cases of the disease. The decision was made to use this money to improve the capacity of Waverly Hills, and by August 1912, all tuberculosis patients were redirected from the city hospital to Waverly Hills. Patients were staying in tents on the grounds of Waverly as they awaited the completion of the hospital, but this was completed by December of that year. In 1914, another pavilion was built in order to accommodate up to 40 children, increasing the capacity to 130 patients. Not only was the building designed to help treat children stricken with the disease, it was also used to help house children of parents suffering from tuberculosis. It wasn't until March of 1924 that the decision was made to yet again expand Waverly Hills. Constant necessary repairs to the wooden structure, along with increased demand for bed space, were the main reasons given for the expansion. The new Waverly Hills would be a 5-story tall sanitarium with room for 400 patients and would finish construction in 1926. The next 17 years were spent in almost constant demand as tuberculosis was rampant and deadly. Before the invention of the antibiotics needed to treat tuberculosis, coming down with the disease was a death sentence. The vast majority of patients who entered into Waverly Hills didn't leave again. So high was the death toll that body disposal was a major issue. Not wanting to dispose of the bodies in front of patients wasn't only out of respect for the dead, or out of fear of upsetting the patients either. It was believed the corpse of somebody who had died of tuberculosis was incredibly contagious, and this led to the construction of the dead chute. The dead chute was a tunnel that led from the hospital to the nearby railroad track, where the bodies were taken away via motorized rail and cable system and hoisted into the waiting trains to be taken away and destroyed. During 1943, the drug streptomycin was created and tuberculosis could finally be treated successfully. Streptomycin is an antibiotic used in the treatment of severe diseases including tuberculosis that was created by Alan Schultz, a PhD student of Rutgers University. This drug led to the major decline of tuberculosis and as a direct result, a decline for the need for a 400-patient tuberculosis hospital. Waverly Hills closed its doors as a tuberculosis hospital for the last time in 1961, when its remaining patients were sent to Hazelwood Sanatorium, a neighbouring hospital close to Louisville. Waverly Hills was reopened and renamed in 1962 as the Woodhaven Geriatric Centre. The centre focused on treatment of elderly patients with dementia and mobility issues, but was also known to take care of the severely mentally enfeebled. The centre remained open until 1982, when it was closed by the state under the mounting pressure of several claims of severe neglect and abuse of the patients at the hands of the staff. After the 1982 shutdown, several people had ideas for the redevelopment of the grounds, including a minimum security prison, apartments, and a hotel, although none of these ever came to fruition. It wasn't until 2001 that it was once again put to some use, as it was sold to Tina and Charlie Mattingly, who hold tours of the building for guests. The owners host a haunted house every Halloween in order to help pay for the restoration they continue to carry out on both the interior and exterior of the building, with a focus on the glasswork and windows. It's not hard to understand that a place such as Waverly Hills that has seen so much pain and suffering is teeming with paranormal activity. Several different stories detailing the unexplained are attributed to this place of agony and illness. Some of these tales may just leave you feeling a little tight in the chest. It's no surprise that Waverly Hills has an overlying feeling of foreboding and dread attached to the entire compound. Some attribute this to the overall misery experienced here over the years, but others believe it's actually the Creeper. The Creeper is a large black entity said to crawl around on all fours across the grounds and throughout the corridors of Waverly Hills. It is a mainly shadowy and vaguely animalistic figure, hating guests and disturbances alike. There are a few theories as to what the Creeper could be. The most popular view being that it's a demonic presence feeding off of the suffering of the patients had undergone during their treatment. Another popular theory is that it's the spirit of a person whose very soul was twisted and warped by the agony and pain suffered during its treatment. Whatever this entity is, one thing is for certain: anyone who has ever encountered it has always left filled with dread and the thoughts of death. Another, slightly less terrifying but still unsettling entity that roams the Waverly Hills Sanatorium is that of Timmy. Timmy is believed to be the spirit of a 6 or 7 year old boy who was taken from the world too soon by the affliction he was in Waverly to treat. It is often suggested that as a young boy died with so much of his life left to live, he is unable to move on and continues to haunt the scene of his demise. He's often sighted on the upper floors of the sanitarium, running from room to room. Several visitors who have gone in search of Timmy claim that he will even play with you. If you were to place a small ball in the vicinity of where the activity is believed to take place, several eyewitnesses have claimed that the ball will roll back to you, almost like a paranormal game of catch. More staunch critics believe that this movement is more likely due to the draft or an uneven floor, but there is an undeniable feeling of both youth in the upper floors and death. Clearly, it's been proven that the people who came to the Waverly Hills Sanitarium for help suffered an incredible amount of pain and agony, and there is no better reminder of this than this bloody spectre. Although very little is known about this particular spirit, or who she may have been, there is a visage of an elderly woman who roams the halls of the hospital, covered in blood, dishevelled, and crying out in pain. It is believed that the entity is searching, in vain, for some kind of help or assistance. It is wildly theorized that it is in fact the ghost of a woman who was consumed by tuberculosis and is looking for help in her recovery. Although once the apparition is approached, it oftentimes runs away, shrieking and crying. This, along with the spectre's aged appearance, has led some to speculate that perhaps it is actually the ghost of an abused patient from the hospital's time as a home for the geriatrics. The hospital was closed due to this abuse, so it stands to reason that somebody could have been neglected so badly that its spirit haunts the halls searching for help, but fleeing in terror once people are seen, perhaps confusing them for the cruel nurses and doctors who made their last weeks on earth such misery. Hard as it may be to fathom, it wasn't only the patients that suffered in the hallowed halls of Waverly. Sometimes it was the staff. Room 502 is notorious for its feeling of dread, and its part in this macabre history goes back to 1928. According to legend, Mary Lee, head nurse at the time, was found hanging from a light fixture in the room. It is assumed that working in such a grim and depressing situation and having to watch her fellow men and women die in hundreds, coupled with what is suspected to be an unwanted pregnancy, distressed the woman to the point that she felt like life was no longer worth living. It is unknown for how long the body had hung there, Sadly, she isn't the only member of staff to lose her life in room 502 either. Less than 4 years later, another nurse jumped from the roof patio up to the ground 5 floors below. This time, however, it is unknown as to what triggered this particular nurse to commit suicide. Some even believe she didn't jump, but was pushed instead, but whether by another person or by something much more paranormal, we just don't know. Some now claim that the ghost of Mary Lee can be seen in room 502 around the doorway. There is even an older photo taken that appears to show the poor unfortunate nurse in the halls of Waverly long after she had shuffled off this mortal coil. Although the photo is quite clear, I'll leave the choice of whether to believe it or not up to you. It's estimated that a total of 63,000 people died throughout the years in the Waverly Hills Sanatorium. From the second this accursed hospital opened its doors, right up until today, it has been associated with nothing else except disease, death, and pain. Add to that the people who lost their lives to suicide or possible murder, and to those in Waverly's years as the Woodhaven Geriatric Centre, who suffered through neglect, pain, and misery at the hands of staff, you're left with plenty of reason as to why this is to be considered one of the most haunted sanitariums in the world. Personally, I can't help but feel this is the kind of place paranormal investigators and storytellers alike dream of. It is the perfect storm of dark, gruesome past, death, suicide, and misery that are always associated with hauntings, alongside easy to come by first person accounts, pictures, and detailed records of its different uses. It's something that will bring you gold every time you search for details and will chill you to the core every time. Believe it or not, that's up to you. But I think we can all agree. When it comes to the dark stories and histories attached to the Waverly Hills Sanatorium of Louisville, Jefferson County, Kentucky, it's grim. It's ghoulish. Good night.